Alex, I thought owning our home would be a dream, but it's turning into a nightmare, I said, stirring the spaghetti sauce absent-mindedly. Karen, Alex sighed, this is what families do. My parents just want to be involved. Involved? They're here every single weekend. This isn't living, I mumbled under my breath, but he didn't catch it, or he chose not to. The doorbell rang and Alex's eyes brightened. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. He swung the door open. Mom! Dad! So good to see you. Douglas and Nancy waltzed in without taking off their shoes. Douglas, a burly man with a booming voice, immediately took command. Hey, Karen, I see you're cooking. Smells good. Nancy and I were just saying we hoped you'd make dinner. Of course, Douglas, I managed through gritted teeth. Make yourselves comfortable. They had been doing this ever since Alex and I bought this house. Every Saturday, without fail, they arrived unannounced and stayed through Sunday. My plans, my life, discarded. Tonight was supposed to be different. I had planned a quiet night, just Alex and me. But here we were again. Karen, you need some help with that? Nancy offered, but her hands remained firmly in her lap. I've got it, I responded. Though my tone was polite, my patience was wearing thin. As the evening dragged on, I found myself doing everything, cooking, cleaning, and entertaining. Later that night, once his parents retreated to the guest room, I confronted Alex in the hallway. This can't go on. I feel like a guest in my own house. Karen, it's just the weekend. Why do you always blow it out of proportion? Alex retorted. I bit my lip, holding back the flood of frustrations. They expect me to cook and clean like I'm their personal maid. Can't they help themselves? It's just what families do for each other. Why do you have to make it a big deal? He turned away, signaling the end of the conversation. His dismissiveness stung. I walked into our bedroom and closed the door quietly. I didn't want another argument tonight. Exhausted, I fell into bed, my mind racing with thoughts of another lost weekend. Sunday arrived with more of the same. By lunchtime, I was washing the last of the dishes, my fingers pruning from the soapy water. Douglas lounged in the living room, flipping through TV channels, and Nancy chatted with Alex. No one even noticed how drained I looked. Finally, they prepared to leave. Bye, Karen. See you next weekend. Nancy chirped on their way out. Next weekend. The words echoed in my mind like a death knell. I forced a smile and waved. As the door clicked shut, I knew I had to find a way to bring change. This was our home, our life. I couldn't allow it to slip away under the weight of their relentless presence. Another Saturday rolled around, and my stomach tightened as the doorbell echoed through the house. I had barely finished my morning coffee when Alex's parents stormed in, bringing an unwelcome whirlwind of demands. Alex, help your father with the garden, Nancy ordered, already dressed in her gardening clothes. Karen, you can start on breakfast, can't you? Without waiting for my response, she continued, and after breakfast, we'll need some help organizing the attic. It's a mess up there. I looked over at Alex, hoping he'd see the exhaustion etched on my face. Instead, he nodded eagerly and followed his father outside. My heart sank as I retreated into the kitchen. As I cooked, I noticed Nancy pacing behind me, occasionally peering over my shoulder. She made a show of adjusting my work. You should add more salt. And are you sure those eggs are cooked properly? Douglas likes them a certain way. Grinding my teeth, I kept my tone controlled. I've got it, Nancy. Breakfast was a tense affair. Every bite felt forced as they critiqued every dish. Once it was over, I barely had time to inhale before Nancy ushered me towards the attic. I don't know how you've let it get so disorganized, she criticized, shaking her head. You have to stay on top of these things, Karen. Hours passed in a haze of dust and redundant suggestions from Nancy. She directed me, delegating the heavy lifting to me while she sorted through old holiday decorations. Finally, as the afternoon wore on, I found a moment with Alex. He was wiping his brow, seemingly proud of the work he'd done outside. We need to talk, I whispered urgently. Now? Can't it wait until later? Alex frowned, already distracted by his parents' calls from downstairs. No, it can't, I insisted. We walked to a quiet corner of the backyard. Your parents... It's too much. They expect me to be at their beck and call. I can't spend every weekend like this, don't you see? Alex sighed heavily. Karen, they're my parents. They're not going to be around forever. Why can't you just put up with them? It's family. And what about us, Alex? I felt the tears prickling my eyes. There's no room for us to be a family. It's all about them. He looked away, shaking his head. You're overreacting. This is how it is. Just accept it. I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. Accept it. That simple phrase, so dismissive, so final, spoke volumes about where I stood in his life. That evening, after another taxing day, I lay in bed unable to sleep. The light snoring of Alex beside me was almost mocking. He never saw it, could never understand the toll this was taking on me. His parents had become a wedge, driving us further apart with every unwanted visit. Determination surged through me. This was my home too, and I wouldn't allow their presence to overshadow my joy any longer. If Alex wouldn't stand by my side, I'd find another way to fight for the life I deserved. The seeds of a plan began to take root. Sunday arrived with an air of inevitability. I braced myself for the usual impositions, already weary in anticipation. As I moved through my morning routine, I kept turning one idea over in my mind. It was desperate, but I had to try something. When Alex walked into the kitchen, I took a deep breath. Alex, I think it's only fair if my parents visit too. Maybe next weekend? He stopped, coffee mug halfway to his lips. What? Your parents are always here, I explained, trying to keep my tone calm. It would be nice to have my parents over for once. Balance things out, you know? His eyes darkened instantly. Don't you dare invite them. This is our house. They'd only complicate things more. A sharp pang of hurt hit me. Complicate things more? How do you think I feel every weekend, Alex? It's always your parents, never mine. He slammed his mug on the counter, coffee spilling over the rim. If you don't like it here, maybe you should leave. His words stung like a physical slap. Maybe I will, I snapped, my voice trembling despite my attempt to stay cool. And you can live every day with your perfect parents. I stormed out, slamming the door behind me hard enough to rattle the frame. Tears of frustration blurred my vision as I grabbed my keys. Driving away, I directed my route to the one place I knew I'd find solace, my parents' house. When I arrived, my mom Linda opened the door. The worry instantly creased her face. Karen, what's wrong? Can I stay for a while? The words came out as a choked whisper. Of course, honey, she said, wrapping her arms around me. Inside, Dad looked up from his paper, concern etching onto his face as soon as he saw me. What happened, Karen? I inhaled deeply, trying to steady my voice. Alex, his parents are always there, every weekend. He doesn't see the problem. It's like I'm invisible. Linda squeezed my hand. You're never invisible to us. You know that. Dad's eyes hardened. You don't have to put up with this. You deserve to live a life that makes you happy, Karen. I don't know what to do. I can't go back. Not like this. Linda nodded. Then don't. Stay with us while you figure things out. That night I lay in my old bedroom, the familiar surroundings bringing a measure of comfort. I scrolled through my phone, searching for something, anything that could give me a way out. A divorce lawyer's website caught my eye. It seemed drastic, but so was my situation. The next morning I called the number. An appointment was set for later in the week. As I hung up, determination settled in. Douglas and Nancy had underestimated my resolve. They saw me as a pushover, someone who would endlessly accommodate their whims. But they were about to see a side of me they hadn't expected. That week, I stayed with my parents, a sense of clarity settling in. I knew what I had to do. Meetings with the lawyer confirmed my course of action. The legal process was daunting, but the lawyer assured me I had a strong case. We discussed filing for divorce and the steps to gather evidence of emotional neglect. One evening, while drinking coffee in the kitchen, my mom sat down next to me. Are you sure you want to go through with this, Karen? I nodded resolutely. Yes, Mom. Alex doesn't respect me. I need to reclaim my life. She gave me an encouraging smile. We're here for you, whatever you need. A few days later, I took the first step. I went back to the house while Alex was at work to collect my things. I needed more than just my clothes. I gathered documents, personal items, anything that would help me with the case. As I packed, I spotted a photo of Alex and his parents on the beach. My resolve strengthened. I heard the front door click open. My heart raced. I turned to see Alex standing there, looking confused. Karen, what are you doing here? I came to get my things, Alex, I said, my voice steady. I'm filing for divorce. His eyes widened with shock and anger. Divorce? Karen, you can't be serious. I'm dead serious, Alex. I deserve better than this. He took a step closer, trying to intimidate me. You think you can just walk away? You're not taking anything from this house. I squared my shoulders. I've already talked to a lawyer. I have every right. He laughed, but it was a bitter sound. We'll see about that. I didn't waver, didn't stop packing. I finished gathering what I needed and brushed past him. As I left, I glanced back one last time. The house, once our dream, now felt like a prison. Back at my parents' house, I started the process of piecing my life together. I focused on my work, pouring my energy into my job to distract from the emotional turmoil. My parents were a constant source of strength, their belief in me unwavering. One evening, as I sat down with my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers, my phone rang. It was Alex. "Karen, we need to talk," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Can't we just fix this?" Pain and frustration surged through me. "It's too late, Alex. I'm moving on." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I hung up, feeling a bittersweet mixture of sadness and relief. The next day, I handed over the signed papers to my lawyer, feeling a sense of finality. The battle wasn't over, but I was ready to fight. I was reclaiming my life, one step at a time, and I wasn't looking back. In the weeks that followed, I worked with my lawyer to gather evidence. Every text message, every voicemail, every instance of neglect, I documented it all. My parents were my pillars, always encouraging me, always reminding me of my worth. One Friday evening, I found a moment of peace in my parents' living room. My dad asked, "How's it going, Karen?" "It's a lot, Dad, but I'm managing. I never realized how strong I could be." He nodded approvingly. "We always knew, Karen." The next morning, my lawyer called. "Karen, we need to solidify our evidence. Can you get more footage from your house?" "I can try," I replied, a plan forming in my mind. I drove back to the house when I knew Alex would be out and installed small cameras in common areas. If capturing their behavior could help me, I needed to do it. I felt a pang of invasion, but reminded myself this was necessary for my case. By the following week, the cameras had already gathered significant footage. Every harsh comment, every dismissive gesture, it was all there. Satisfied, I retrieved the camera and handed the evidence to my lawyer. Later that day, I got another call from Alex. "Karen, you don't have to do this. Let's try to fix things." My voice was steady. "Alex, we tried, but you chose your parents over us." Silence hung heavily before he muttered, "You'll regret this." I ended the call, focused on the road ahead. The legal battle was just starting, and I couldn't afford distractions. Watching the footage with my lawyer, I felt an ache in my chest. The cold interactions, the dominance of Douglas and Nancy, it was all too clear. My lawyer nodded. "This solidifies your case. They'll see how he neglected you." One evening, sitting with my mom, I sighed. "Mom, what if they don't believe me? What if the court sides with Alex?" Linda squeezed my hand. "You are worth more than how they treat you. We'll be here, no matter what." My dad joined us, his expression determined. "You always have a place here, Karen. We will back you up." Their words fortified my resolve. Alex had underestimated me, and he needed to understand I was not backing down. The next day, I filed for divorce and formally submitted the evidence. As Alex received the notification, his desperation peaked. He called incessantly, leaving voicemails filled with pleas and anger. I ignored them all. Returning to my parents' house felt like a sanctuary each evening. My mom and dad supported me quietly, their presence a comfort in this storm. The silent scheme was set in motion. Alex's life would begin crumbling as the court date approached. Scattered and stressed, he couldn't balance his work and personal chaos. Each setback echoed through every missed deadline and sleepless night, driving him to the edge. My revenge was silent, devastating, and inevitable. The courtroom was silent as we all took our seats. My heart pounded as I glanced at Alex, who sat across from me, looking visibly stressed. His parents were absent, which seemed uncharacteristic, but I was relieved. This confrontation was between us. My lawyer stood up, addressing the judge confidently. "Your Honor, we present compelling evidence that Mr. Mason's actions caused significant emotional distress to my client, Mrs. Karen Mason." He played the footage from the hidden cameras. Everyone watched as Douglas and Nancy commanded every aspect of our weekends, their voices dripping with condescension. Alex's passive compliance was evident as he brushed off my pleas for space and respect. The courtroom felt heavy with the weight of the evidence. Alex fidgeted, his lawyer glaring daggers at him. "Mr. Mason, my lawyer continued, repeatedly disregarded Mrs. Mason's well-being, prioritizing his parents over their marriage. This led to a hostile living environment, causing her undue stress and emotional harm. Alex jumped from his seat, his voice strained. That's not true. They were just visiting. My lawyer turned to him, calm and collected. Just visiting? These visits stripped Mrs. Mason of her autonomy and peace in her own home. You facilitated this. The judge's gaze fixed on Alex. Mr. Mason, your actions or lack thereof have clearly contributed to this discord. The evidence speaks for itself. Feeling the gravity of the situation, I kept my eyes forward, refusing to look at Alex. Moments later, the judge ruled, in light of this evidence, I award Mrs. Mason ownership of the house and a significant portion of the joint assets. A wave of relief washed over me. The ordeal was not entirely over, but this victory was monumental. I glanced at Alex one more time, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. As the proceedings ended and we all stood to leave, Alex approached me, his expression desperate. Karen, this ruins me. Please, can't we talk about this? I steeled myself, meeting his gaze without flinching. It's too late for that, Alex. We're done. Walking out of the courthouse, my parents flanked me, their pride apparent. You did it, Karen, my mom whispered, squeezing my hand. Yes, and now it's time to move forward, I replied, feeling a sense of liberation mingled with lingering sadness. The man I had loved had become a stranger tangled in obligations that strangled our bond. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into finalizing the logistics of the separation. Alex tried to contact me multiple times, but I didn't respond. I was already rebuilding my life, renovating the house to erase the painful memories and claiming each room as a space for my new beginning. Life was slowly shifting. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like I was able to breathe again, free from the chains that had held me down. The aftermath of the courtroom victory brought a calm I hadn't felt in years. But it was a calm dotted with moments of harsh reality checks. Alex, predictably, spiraled. Reports reached me through mutual friends and colleagues. Alex had missed major deadlines at work. His performance plummeted, and soon enough he lost his job. I heard he spent most days sulking at his parents' house, unable to face the wreckage of his life. For once, Douglas and Nancy were unable to dictate a solution, and that brought an unexpected sliver of satisfaction. One evening, as I repainted the living room, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Alex's number. I hesitated, but decided to answer. Karen, he started, his voice cracking. Please, can we talk? I'm a mess. I need you. His desperation was palpable, but I kept my response cold. Alex, you made your choices. You chose them over us. I lost my job, Karen. I'm losing everything. His tone edged on hysteria. I paused, letting him feel the weight of his words. You're reaping what you sowed, Alex. I warned you, but you never listened. Before he could respond, I hung up. The line had been drawn long ago, and I was committed to moving forward. The next few weeks saw the final touches on my house renovations. The physical changes, new paint, new furniture, felt cathartic, symbolizing the fresh start I desperately needed. One crisp fall morning, as I was sipping coffee by the kitchen window, lost in thought about my next steps, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Alex standing there, looking disheveled and broken. Karen, please, he pleaded. I messed up. Can we please try again? I looked at him, feeling a twinge of the old love but overcome by the betrayal that had led us here. Alex, the past is gone. You can't undo what you did. His shoulders slumped. Karen, I'm so sorry. I don't know who I am anymore without you. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. You'll have to figure that out. You had your chance to build a life with me, but you threw it away. Now, live with what you've sown. He stood there, silent, tears forming in his eyes. For a moment, I almost softened, but then the memories of every painful, dismissive moment came flooding back. This was a consequence he needed to face. Goodbye, Alex, I said gently, closing the door. As the weeks turned into months, things settled into a new rhythm. I focused on my career, dug into hobbies I'd neglected, and rekindled friendships. Supportive notes and visits from friends reminded me that life was moving forward. One day, my friend Sarah dropped by. You look happier, Karen, she observed over a glass of wine. I am, I nodded, smiling genuinely. I finally feel like I'm living my life for me. The drama of the past year had carved a new path for me. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about finding justice and reclaiming my life. With every step forward, the shadow of the past grew fainter, and a brighter, self-empowered future loomed ahead. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. Months passed, and life began to take on a new sense of normalcy. The renovations on the house were complete, erasing any trace of the tumultuous past I'd shared with Alex. The place felt like my own sanctuary now, each room imbued with my choices, my style, my freedom. One spring afternoon, as I was planting a garden, Sarah arrived with a bottle of wine. "Thought you could use a break," she said, grinning. I wiped the dirt from my hands and motioned her to the patio. Perfect timing. I could use a drink. As we sat on the patio, Sarah looked around appreciatively. "You've really made this place your own. It's beautiful, Karen." "Thanks," I replied, sipping my wine. "It feels good to have control over my life again." The conversation flowed easily, and I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. The weight of the past had lifted, replaced by a renewed focus on the future. A week later, as I wrapped up a project at work, my boss called me into his office. "Karen, you've been doing outstanding work. We'd like to offer you a promotion." My heart leaped. "Thank you. I won't let you down." Driving home that evening, I felt a sense of accomplishment. My professional life was thriving, and for the first time I felt completely at peace with where I was headed. One Saturday, I decided to visit my parents. They had been my rock through everything, and I needed to share my good news. As I walked in, my mom greeted me warmly. "Karen?" What a pleasant surprise. "Mom, Dad, I have great news. I got a promotion," I announced, smiling broadly. "That's fantastic," Dad beamed. "We're so proud of you." Mom hugged me. "You deserve this. You've worked so hard." We spent the afternoon catching up and celebrating, their pride in me palpable. Life had indeed taken a turn for the better. That night, lying in bed, I reflected on the journey. The pain, the heartbreak, it had all led to this moment of empowerment and self-discovery. Alex and his parents were a distant memory, their hold on me completely severed. A few weeks later, as I was enjoying a quiet evening at home, my phone rang. It was Alex's number. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up. "Karen," he said, his voice tentative, "I heard about your promotion. Congrats." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone even. I'm really sorry for everything," he added, his voice heavy with regret. For a moment, I felt a pang of something. Sadness, maybe, but it passed quickly. "Alex, it's all in the past now. I hope you find your own path forward," he sighed. "I guess this is goodbye, then." "Yes, it is. Goodbye, Alex." Hanging up, I felt a sense of finality. This chapter was closed, and I was ready to embrace the future. The garden I'd planted was starting to bloom, vibrant colors symbolizing the new life I'd cultivated for myself. As I stood on the patio watching the sunset, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally free. And the future was mine to shape. I was folding laundry in the quiet of our suburban home when the phone rang. It was an ordinary Thursday, but that phone call was about to shatter the mundanity of my life. I wiped my hands on my apron as I answered. "Hey, Mom, it's Lucas," came the voice of my son, who had ventured out into the world, leaving the nest for college 2 years ago. "Lucas, darling, is everything okay?" I asked, a smile naturally forming on my lips at the sound of his voice. There was a pause, a hesitation I wasn't used to with Lucas. "Mom, I need to ask you something. Where's Dad these days?" I frowned slightly, puzzled. "Your father?" "He's been really busy with work. He's staying at the company's apartment for a while." "Why do you ask?" Another pause, longer this time. Lucas's voice, when it came, was laden with uncertainty. "Mom, I think Dad's company doesn't have any company apartments." My heart skipped a beat. "How do you know that?" "Well, I was at this job fair, and I overheard some people talking about Dad's company. They said there aren't any company apartments. Mom, is it possible that Dad is lying to us?" The room suddenly felt colder, the walls closing in. I struggled to maintain my composure. "Lucas, are you sure? Maybe you misunderstood." "No, Mom, I'm sure, and I think Dad is seeing someone else." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Lucas, that's a serious accusation. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" "I wish I were, Mom. I saw Dad with this woman younger, maybe in her 20s. They seemed close. Too close." My hands trembled, the phone almost slipping from my grasp. The man I had spent 20 years of my life with, could he really betray us like this? "Mom, are you there?" Lucas's voice was laced with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. Yes, I'm here. Lucas, thank you for telling me. I need some time to think about this. We'll figure this out, Mom. I'm here for you, he said firmly. After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, the unfinished laundry forgotten. My mind raced with questions and fears. Had I been so blind? Was the love and trust I invested in my marriage a mere facade? The thought of Mark with another woman, especially someone Lucas's age, churned my stomach. I had to find out the truth. But how? The idea of confronting Mark terrified me. Yet the thought of living in ignorance was even worse. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them, no matter how painful they might be. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the room, I realized that my once peaceful life was now on the brink of a storm, and I had to brace myself for whatever was coming. Saturday morning dawned with a heaviness that seemed to mirror my mood. Mark was due to visit this weekend, but the thought no longer brought me joy. The words of my son, Lucas, echoed in my mind, tainting every memory I had of Mark. As I prepared breakfast, the doorbell rang. It was my in-laws, George and Helen, arriving for their weekly visit. Despite the turmoil within, I greeted them with a forced smile. "Emma, dear, you look a bit off. Is everything all right?" Helen asked, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Just a headache," I lied, unwilling to burden them with my suspicions. We sat around the breakfast table, chatting about mundane things. But my heart wasn't in it. My gaze kept drifting to Mark's empty chair, a stark reminder of the growing distance between us. When the topic turned to Mark, Helen's tone was warm. "He's been working so hard lately. You must be proud of him, getting that big project at the office." I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, very proud." George, always the jovial one, chimed in. "Remember how he used to say he'd be a big shot one day? Looks like he was right." Their pride in their son was palpable, and it twisted the knife in my heart further. How could I shatter this image they had of Mark? The loving son, the dedicated husband. But beneath that facade lay a different truth, one that Lucas had unwittingly uncovered. As they continued to praise Mark, a part of me wanted to scream, to tell them that their perfect son was a liar, a cheat. But I couldn't, not without proof. The rest of their visit passed in a blur. I was there, but not really. My mind was elsewhere, caught in a storm of betrayal and hurt. After they left, I found myself wandering through the house, lost in thought. Our home, once a haven of love and security, now felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at any moment. I stumbled upon a photo album, pages filled with pictures of happier times. Mark and I laughing, holding each other. Was it all just a lie? Had I been living a dream while he lived a double life? That evening, as I lay in bed, sleep eluded me. I realized that I couldn't let this go. I needed to confront Mark, to hear the truth from his lips. Whatever that truth might be, I was ready to face it. I had to be. For my own sanity. And deep down, a part of me yearned for revenge. If Mark had shattered our vows, then he didn't deserve my silence. He didn't deserve the facade of a happy family that I had helped build. As the night deepened, so did my resolve. I would confront Mark, and if my fears were confirmed, he would pay for his betrayal. In what way, I wasn't sure yet, but he would pay. Monday arrived with a sense of foreboding. I had spent the weekend in turmoil, oscillating between denial and a desire for the truth. Today I decided I would confront Mark. As the clock ticked closer to the time Mark was due to arrive, my anxiety grew. My hands trembled as I prepared coffee, each spoonful of sugar sounding unnervingly loud in the silent kitchen. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Mark stood there, his smile faltering slightly as he noticed my somber expression. "Emma, what's wrong?" he asked, stepping inside. I led him to the living room, my heart pounding. "We need to talk, Mark." He looked concerned now, his eyes searching mine. "Of course, anything." I took a deep breath, the words I had rehearsed all weekend spilling out. "Lucas called. He said something disturbing about you being unfaithful." Mark's reaction was immediate, his face flushed, his eyes darting away. "Lucas said what? That's ridiculous, Emma." But his denial lacked conviction, his voice betraying him. I pressed on, the hurt and anger giving me strength. "He saw you, Mark, with a younger woman. He's convinced you're having an affair." Mark's posture stiffened, his expression hardening. "Lucas is mistaken. I can't believe you'd think I'd do something like that." But the more he denied, the clearer the truth became. His body language, the evasion in his eyes, it all pointed to one painful reality. Mark was lying. Are you really going to stand there and lie to me, Mark? My voice trembled with emotion. After all these years, you owe me the truth. For a moment he looked like he might confess, but then his face closed off, his voice cold. I have nothing to confess, Emma. If you choose to believe Lucas over me, then that's your problem. His words felt like a slap in the face. The man I had loved, trusted, and supported was now a stranger, hiding behind a veil of lies and deceit. The conversation spiraled into an argument, accusations and denials flying. But no confession came. Mark maintained his innocence, even as his lies crumbled around him. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, I ended the confrontation. I can't do this anymore, Mark. I don't know who you are. Mark left, his departure leaving a cold void in the house. I sat there alone, the weight of his betrayal crushing me. But amidst the pain, a fire was kindling within me. A fire fueled by betrayal and the desire for revenge. Mark had chosen to deceive and hurt me. Now, it was my turn to make him pay for his lies. I didn't know how yet, but I was determined. Mark would not get away with this. He would feel the consequences of his actions, just as I was feeling the pain of his betrayal. The days following my confrontation with Mark were a blur of emotions. Betrayal, anger, and disbelief swirled within me, a constant storm. But amidst the chaos, a new resolve was forming. I wouldn't be a victim. I would fight back. One morning, as I sat at the kitchen table going through our finances, the reality of my situation became starkly clear. Mark had always controlled the money, and now I was left with barely enough to cover the bills. The thought of asking him for more was intolerable. Determined, I decided to take control of my life. I started looking for a job, something I hadn't done since before Lucas was born. I scoured the classifieds, sent out resumes, and finally I got a call for an interview at a local retail store. The interview day arrived, and as I sat across from the store manager, Mr. Thompson, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. His questions were straightforward, and I answered them as best as I could, emphasizing my eagerness to learn and adapt. "You've been out of the workforce for a while," Mr. Thompson noted, his tone neutral. "Yes," I admitted, "but I'm ready to start again. I'm hardworking and quick to learn." Mr. Thompson nodded, his expression softening. "All right, Mrs. Thompson, we're willing to give you a chance." Gratitude flooded through me. This was more than a job. It was a step towards my independence. As I started working, I found a sense of empowerment that I hadn't felt in years. Each day at the store was challenging, but it was also liberating. I was making my own money, no longer solely dependent on Mark. However, my newfound independence seemed to irk Mark. He started calling me, his tone oscillating between condescension and anger. "Why do you need to work?" he sneered during one call. "I provide for you, don't I? Or are you trying to make a point?" His words stung, but they also fueled my resolve. "I'm working because I want to be independent, Mark. I'm not your puppet anymore." There was a pause, and then he laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "Well, if you're so independent, maybe I should stop supporting you altogether. See how you like that." The threat was clear, but I refused to be intimidated. "Do what you must, Mark. I will survive, with or without your support." After that call, Mark cut the financial support he had been giving me. It was a blow, but not an unexpected one. I tightened my belt, budgeted rigorously, and focused on my job. As the days passed, my anger towards Mark turned into something else, a burning desire for revenge. He thought he could control me, break me. But he was wrong. I was stronger than he knew. I started to plan, to think of ways to expose him for what he was. A cheater, a liar, a manipulator. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain he had caused me, and I was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. The opportunity for my revenge presented itself unexpectedly. Mark's parents, George and Helen, invited us for a family dinner, a tradition we had maintained for years. This time, however, the dinner was anything but ordinary for me. It was the stage where Mark's facade would crumble. I arrived early to help with preparations, my heart heavy yet determined. Helen noticed my subdued mood, but attributed it to stress. Little did she know the turmoil that churned within me. As we were setting the table, the doorbell rang. It was Mark, his usual confident self, unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. Following him was Lucas, my son, the bearer of the truth. Dinner commenced with light conversation, but the air was heavy with unspoken words. I glanced at Lucas, giving him a subtle nod. It was time. Lucas cleared his throat, commanding the attention of the table. There's something I need to say, something about Dad. Mark laughed it off. What is it, son? Another one of your pranks? But Lucas's expression was grave. No, Dad, this is serious. I saw you with another woman. Not just once, multiple times. The room went silent. Mark's face turned ashen, his confident demeanor faltering. What are you talking about, Lucas? That's nonsense, Mark stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. Lucas's gaze was unwavering. I saw you, Dad. You were with her at a hotel. She's young, about my age. You can't deny it. Helen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. George's face hardened, his eyes narrowing at Mark. Is this true, Mark? Are you cheating on Emma? Helen's voice was a whisper, laced with disbelief and pain. Mark's facade finally broke. He looked from face to face, realizing the gravity of the situation. It's not what you think. She's just a colleague. But his weak defense fell on deaf ears. The damage was done. George stood up, his voice thundering. You bring shame to this family. How could you do this to Emma, to your own son? Mark tried to argue, to justify his actions, but his words were empty, hollow. The truth was laid bare for all to see. I watched, a mix of satisfaction and sorrow in my heart. Mark had been exposed. His betrayal, his lies, all out in the open. But the pain it caused his parents, the disappointment in Lucas's eyes, was a bitter pill to swallow. The dinner ended abruptly, the family shattered by the revelation. Mark left, his head hung low, his image as the perfect son, the perfect husband, destroyed. As I drove home that night, a part of me felt vindicated, but another part grieved for the loss of the family I once knew. Yet amidst the chaos, I knew one thing for certain. Mark would pay for his betrayal. This was just the beginning of his downfall. The fallout from the dinner was immediate and far-reaching. Mark's betrayal had not only fractured our family, but also stained his reputation. His parents, once his staunchest supporters, were now his fiercest critics. In the following weeks, I watched as Mark's life began to unravel. His affair, once hidden in the shadows, was now public knowledge, and the consequences were devastating. His work suffered, friends distanced themselves, and even our son, Lucas, struggled to come to terms with his father's actions. But amidst the chaos, a plan formed in my mind, a plan for retribution. Mark had taken so much from me, it was time he understood the pain he had inflicted. I began by reaching out to a lawyer, a friend from before I married Mark. I explained my situation, the years of emotional neglect, and Mark's recent infidelity. She was sympathetic and immediately offered to help. We'll make sure you get what you deserve, Emma. It's time for Mark to face the consequences of his actions, she said with determination. Armed with legal support, I confronted Mark about a divorce. He was taken aback, his arrogance faltering under the weight of his crumbling world. Emma, please, let's talk about this. I know I made a mistake, but I can change, he pleaded, a shadow of his former self. But I was resolute. It's too late for that, Mark. You've made your choices, and now you must live with them. The divorce proceedings were messy, as Mark tried to cling to his rapidly diminishing assets. But my lawyer was relentless, and in the end, I was awarded a significant portion of our shared assets, including the house. As Mark's world crumbled, I began to rebuild mine. The divorce had granted me a substantial settlement, which I used to secure my financial independence. I continued working, finding solace and strength in my newfound autonomy. The final blow to Mark came unexpectedly. His affair with the younger woman, now his only solace, ended abruptly. She left him, unable to cope with the public scrutiny and the reality of being with a man whose life was in ruins. Mark was left alone, a shadow of the man he once was. His career, his reputation, his personal life, all had fallen apart because of his choices. As for me, I found peace in my independence. I reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and even began dating again, something I hadn't thought possible. The path to healing was long and fraught with challenges, but I emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Mark's betrayal had broken me, but in the end, it had also freed me. I had faced my deepest fears and come out victorious. And though I took no pleasure in Mark's downfall, there was a sense of justice in seeing him face the consequences of his actions. He had chosen his path, and now he had to walk it alone. As I looked to the future, I knew that new horizons awaited me, horizons filled with hope, strength, and the promise of a life lived on my terms.